Have you ever stopped to think about how ancient people saw the world? I mean, how did they explain all the different cultures, languages, and nations they saw around them? Well, tucked away in the book of Genesis, there's this incredible document. It's like an ancient map of all humanity. Now, these kinds of maps were pretty common back then, but this one has a huge twist. It claims that every single person on Earth traces their roots back to just three brothers, all under one God. It's called the Table of Nations, and it gives us this amazing peek into the ancient worldview. So, let's dive in.
So our main source for this whole thing is the text that lays out the Table of Nations. But here's the thing you got to understand. It's not a map with borders and rivers like we'd think of today. Nope, it's a genealogical map. Think of it more like a giant family tree for the whole world, explaining how everyone spread out and created all those ancient civilizations.
And that brings us to the big question, right? It's really what we're digging into today. After this massive world-ending flood basically hits the reset button, how does humanity go from just one single family, Noah and his sons, to this incredibly diverse, complex world of nations that we see all over the ancient world? How did that happen?
All right, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start right after the flood. Then we'll get into the Table of Nations itself. After that, we'll hit the Tower of Babel, see how the story zooms in on one family line, and finally talk about why this ancient map is still so important.
Okay, so picture this. The world has basically been wiped clean. The only people left are Noah, his wife, their three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. And according to the story, these three guys, they're the fathers of everyone. Every single nation, every people group on the planet is said to trace its roots right back to one of these three brothers.
And that leads us right to the heart of it all, the Table of Nations, found in Genesis chapter 10. This is basically the ancient author's way of making sense of their world, of organizing all the different people they knew about into one massive connected family. So let's go through it, one son at a time.
First up, we've got Japheth. The text says his descendants spread out and became the coastland peoples. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's pretty much understood to be talking about the nations living along the coasts, to the north and west of Israel. Think across the Mediterranean Sea. And this is where this old map starts to feel really concrete. The name Javan, for example, is almost always linked with the Greeks. Tubal seems to point to people in Anatolia, what we call Turkey today. Tyrus is often connected with the seafaring folks around the Aegean. You can see what they're doing, right? They're mapping out the world they knew in Europe and Asia Minor. Okay, next is Noah's son, Ham. And his family line? It's a huge deal. His descendants represent the major powers to the south of Israel. We're talking about some of the biggest, most powerful empires of the ancient world. But there's also this theme of conflict in his line that's going to become super important later in the story.
So from Ham you get Mizraim. That's the Hebrew name for the powerhouse nation of Egypt. You get Cush, which is linked to Ethiopia and Nubia. And then, and this is a big one, you get Canaan. Those are the people living in the land that would later be promised to Israel. Oh, and we also meet this guy Nimrod, a mighty hunter who founded a city called Babel. And you're definitely going to want to file that name away.
And last but not least, we have Shem. Now, his part of the list might look pretty simple at first glance, but don't let that fool you. This is the family line that the rest of the Bible is going to zoom in on big time. Shem's descendants are the peoples of the Middle East, really the heart of the entire biblical world. Okay, so this is really the key. From Shem, you get peoples like the Elamites and Persia and the Assyrians, but the names to watch are Arphaxad and his descendant, Eber. See, it's from Eber that we get the word Hebrew. This isn't just a boring list of names. The author is drawing a straight line right to the people who are about to become the main characters of the whole story.
Now, here's something really cool. If you actually count up all the names, all the descendants in this chapter, you get to the number 70. And for the ancient Israelites, 70 wasn't just a random number. It often stood for completeness, for the whole shebang. So a list of 70 nations, that was their way of saying, this is it. This is everybody, the whole world. So, okay, we've got this tidy family tree of 70 nations. But the story adds a wild detail. Back then, everyone spoke the same language. See, the Table of Nations tells us who all the people are, but it's the next chapter that tells us why they all spread out across the globe. And it all comes down to one event, the Tower of Babel. The story basically goes down in 4 steps. First, you've got everyone together, united, one language, one location. Then, they get ambitious. They decide to build this huge city with a massive tower, not to honor God, but as the text says, to make a name for themselves. Well, God sees this as pure pride and defiance, so he steps in, mixes up their languages, and the result? They can't understand each other anymore, so they're forced to scatter.
And this really gets to the heart of the conflict. Remember, God's first command after the flood was fill the earth. But what do the people at Babel do? The exact opposite. They all huddle together to build a monument to how great they are. They're trying to centralize their power and fame, which is in direct violation of God's command to spread out and populate the whole planet.
So, after this huge, dramatic scattering at Babel, the story does something really interesting. It's like a movie director pulling the camera way back from this wide shot of 70 nations and then starting to zoom in, tighter and tighter and tighter, until it's focused on just one single family line, the descendants of Shem.
The narrative then carefully traces this one line, from Shem down through people like Eber, remember the Hebrew guy. It even points out a man named Peleg, whose name literally means division, because it says, in his time, the earth was divided. I mean, that's a pretty clear nod to the whole Babel event, right? This entire family tree is a countdown, and it's all leading to one person, a man named Abraham. He's the one who will be called out from all these scattered nations to start a brand new one.
So you might be thinking, okay, why all this focus on ancient family trees and stories? Well, it's because this map isn't really about history or geography. It's about theology. It's setting the stage for literally everything that's about to happen in the rest of the Bible. If there's one thing to take away from this, it's this. Before the story ever zooms in on Israel, it goes out of its way to establish that God is the God of all the nations, all 70 of them. He's the one who created them, the one who scattered them, and he's in charge of them all. So Israel's story, it doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It happens inside this much bigger global story.
All right, so let's wrap this all up. What are the big takeaways? First, the story claims all of us share a common origin through Noah's family. Second, the incredible diversity of cultures and languages isn't some accident. It's framed as part of a divine plan. Third, that whole scattering at Babel, it sets the stage for God's plan of redemption. And finally, the story narrows its focus to one family, Abraham's, for a very specific reason, to ultimately bring blessing back to all the families of the earth.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. This ancient story maps out this incredible journey from unity to division, and then points toward this promised future of redemption for everyone. It's a really powerful way to think about our world. So the question is, how does an ancient origin story like this map of humanity, shape how we view our incredibly diverse world today?